You realize when you pair AI, like the right AI tools with the right use cases, we are talking about 50, 70,
Mm.
90% gains in some cases. And I think that's where some people get caught up and think it's hype. It's not. People just they get overwhelmed by the hype if they're not experimenting themselves. Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Show, the podcast that helps your business grow smarter by making AI approachable and actionable. My name is Paul Raitzer. I'm the founder and CEO of Marketing AI Institute, and I'm your host. Each week, I'm joined by my co-host and Marketing AI Institute Chief Content Officer, Mike Kaput, as we break down all the AI news that matters and give you insights and perspectives that you can use to advance your company and your career. Join us as we accelerate AI literacy for all. Welcome to episode 114 of the Artificial Intelligence Show. I'm your host, Paul Raitzer, along with my co-host, Mike Kaput. It is MAICON week. You've been hearing us talk about MAICON. We actually, I was like kind of regretting this last night, Mike. It's like, so today it's September 9th, 10 a.m. Eastern time. And I was like, why did we decide to do an episode in MAICON week
Yeah.
with like the million other things we both have going on? But here we are. We are actually recording this the week of MAICON. As soon as we're done with this, I am packing my stuff. Now, MAICON's in Cleveland, which is our hometown. So luckily, I'm just driving downtown. But I am packing, and we are in it. The rest of the team, I think, is already there. I know Tracy's on site, and the event ops team's there. So it's happening. Hopefully, some of you are joining us this week. I know there's a lot of podcast listeners coming to the conference. So if you're hearing this on Tuesday the 10th and you wanted to do a last minute thing, it kicks off with afternoon workshops on the 10th, and then those are optional. And then the full event starts the morning of September 11th at 8 a.m. with my Road to AGI keynote, which I finished that deck finally, Mike, like yesterday. Although I did a run, I may have to cut a couple of slides. I may have to get it down a few minutes, but um, I think it's gonna be kinda shocking to some people,
Oh,
honestly.
yeah.
Like,
Nice.
yeah, like, I like, in a good way, but I
Mm.
I do think that there's just as I'm putting it together, and it's basically, like, building off of episode 87 of the podcast where we laid out, like, reactions to the Sam Altman quote about, AI doing 95% of what marketers do.
Mm.
And and I think it just makes it very clear to people how close we are to truly transformative experiences in marketing and business and society and educational systems. And like as I was building the presentation, I was becoming more convinced myself of the timeline, of the theory behind like where this is going.
Mm.
Um and not intentionally. Like I was just trying to kind of lay out what I think is happening, but I don't know. I think it's going to be fascinating. And then I did end it with these kind of like 10 or 12 questions specific to the future of marketing that you and I are then going to do in the closing keynote on the
Yeah.
12th. Bring it back around. And what Mike and I are going to do is try and synthesize insights and findings from the 60 some other presentations and sessions, conversations with attendees throughout. And we're going to try and bring that around like 15 to 20 action items everybody can do to prepare for the future, like prepare for what's next. So I don't know. I'm getting excited. Like I think when I'm building up for this event, I just stay so focused on the agenda and my own sessions that I don't get caught up in everything else. And we have this insanely talented event operations team that just makes everything go otherwise. So I always joke, like, I don't even know what the main stage looks like. It's kind of a surprise to me. Like people would think I know this stuff, but I don't. Like other than seeing like a blueprint of where it's going to be, I don't actually know what anything looks like. So it's kind of fun for me to get down there like Monday night and start to actually like see the event, the venue and everything. So that is happening. Mike and I are deep in that this week. We will be there all week, but we will be back next week to do episode 115, and we'll be talking about MAICON and some of the key takeaways from that. So if you want to learn a little bit more about it, last minute, go to maicon.ai. That's MAICON.ai. And there will be an on-demand option that'll go live, I don't know, probably like a week or so after the event. That's going to have the 10 general sessions. And then I think there's about 5 to 7 more. So I think it's going to be about 15 to 17 or so on-demand sessions from MAICON. So if you can't make it and you want to, catch up on all the featured talks and keynotes, that will be available as an on-demand, and we'll share that information with you as we have it. So again, MAICON.ai if you want to learn more about the event. And yeah, hopefully we'll see some of you there. Make sure to come up and say hi to Mike and I. We always love to interact with our listeners and chance to meet everybody. All right, with that, Mike, let's get into the topics of the week.
All right, Paul. So first up is a new tool that you have launched through SmarterX, the AI research and consulting firm you have started in addition to the Institute. And we've talked about a couple of these tools in the past couple episodes. There's a third one now called ProblemsGPT, which is an AI powered tool designed to help businesses identify and prioritize problems that could potentially be solved more effectively using AI. So Problems GPT uses ChatGPT technology to help organizations define problem statements and create preliminary strategic plans for building AI forward businesses. So the approach behind this tool kind of focuses on identifying your known pain points or challenges that could be solved more efficiently and at scale with AI, not just looking at use cases like some of the other tools enable us to do. And then the tool helps you craft a strong problem statement that includes a value statement establishing the worth of solving each problem. And it can also then help you after that draft an initial strategic brief to accelerate AI transformation. So, Paul, maybe to kick things off here, can you talk about why is this tool significant? Like, why is it needed now? And maybe walk us through, like, what is the methodology behind it and, like, how have you been using that?
Yeah, so if anybody's read our book, the Marketing Artificial Intelligence book, there's a chapter dedicated to the two approaches we teach, the two frameworks we teach to adopt AI in an enterprise. And so the first, which we've talked a lot about on the show recently, is the use case model. That is finding the things you already do, the tasks you already do, and leveraging AI technology to do them more efficiently, be more creative, more innovative, more productive. So that's where the jobs GPT came from and the campaigns GPT that we've talked previously on the show about. So those were meant to help you find tasks that you already do and integrate AI to do them smarter, better, faster. The second framework that we teach in the book and that we use in our workshops, and that's actually the forcing function for launching this one today, is the Strategic AI Leader workshop that I teach and that I'm running at MAICON on Tuesday, teaches the problem based model. Now, in the problem based model, I think of more as like the director level and above approach. This is you have goals, you have pain points, you have challenges in the organization and we all have them and they can be related to audience awareness, customer churn, revenue growth, innovation, whatever your challenges are, whatever your domain is. If you're the CEO, it's all of these things, and you're looking at these problems differently. So by understanding what AI is capable of, you start to look at problems in a different way and say, maybe there's a smarter way to solve this. We've been trying to solve this problem for months, for years, for decades in some cases. Maybe we should take a first principles approach to this and revisit how we think about solving this problem.
Mm.
And so that's what the problem-based model teaches, and that's what our workshop teaches is it kind of goes through this framework of how to define a problem statement. As you mentioned, make sure you have a value statement. So you go through and you identify all the challenges you're facing in your organization, and then what is it worth to solve these challenges? Because what then happens is you may have a list. And so in our workshop, we'll actually give people like a blank template and we'll go through and come up with all the different pain points you're dealing with around
Mhm.
these different areas. And then you want to be able to prioritize them by ranking them. And one of the best ways to do that is, well, what is the value for us to solve this? And so, give you a few examples. So, an example problem statement for audience. The problem is we saw a dramatic spike in customer churn last quarter, resulting in a monthly recurring revenue drop for the first time in 2 years. The value statement to solve it, the quarterly loss was $80,000 per month or 680,000 or 600 $960,000 annualized. So that's a problem statement. The second option, we'll do an innovation one. So our growth in existing verticals has stalled, and we need to identify new markets and product ideas that can unlock massive value for the organization. Great, that's a solid problem statement. What's the value? The value, based on historical data and market research, we believe there are two new verticals that could generate 10 million plus each over the next 3 to 5 years. So again, problem value, and then we'll give you one more related to customer churn. We saw a dramatic spike in customer churn last quarter, resulting. Oh, wait, no, I did that one already. We won't do that one again. So, but you get the idea problem, value, problem,
Right.
value. And so, what I did with Problems GPT is I basically just trained a custom GPT to create problem and value statements. So, it's trained on a template of what that looks like, and it's given a bunch of examples so that it knows to do it. And then it'll actually help people craft a proper problem and value statement.
Right.
So that's the first thing is it can help you identify and craft these problem and value statements. But then it actually is trained to help you develop a strategic brief. And this was a big it was a big unlock for me in building this because Mike, you and I have done these workshops together before. What we often do in these workshops is we teach the framework and then we get people to develop a list of all these problem statements. But then, as we do in the book, we say, okay, then here's the 10 steps to then go figure out what to do about it. So in the workshop, we don't actually give people the strategic brief side. We're not saying, okay, here's the 10 ways AI can help you solve that problem. So when I was building this custom GPT, I thought, I wonder if I can give it that ability. I wonder if I can just train it how to write a strategic brief so, like, instantly, they have a starting point.
Mhm.
And so I devised a way to do it, and the first time I tested, I was like, "Oh my gosh, it actually works. Like, this is genius." Not me genius, like, the fact that it does this is genius because it accelerates so much the value people can unlock and, like, how quickly you can move from having this pain point to, like, "Oh, wow, this is a really smart way to maybe do this." And so the way it's designed, again, it's the way the Problems GPT, and you can go to smarterx.ai/problems GPT, and you can go see this for yourself. Um, you need to be logged into ChatGPT then to use it, but just click on the link and go there. It's trained to identify and prioritize the business problems, but then once you lock in your problem, it's actually trained to then develop this strategic brief. And so you can go there, and the three options are help me identify problems. So you can just say, hey, I'm trying to figure out a problem, and it'll walk you through it and it'll ask you questions and kind of guide you through developing a problem statement. Or if you already have a problem statement, you can just drop it in there and then it'll start creating a strategic brief for you. If you're not sure and you want some inspiration, you can just click show me some sample problem statements. And
Mm.
the thing I found here, and I didn't even train it to do this, it'll give you example problem statements. I think I taught it to give it like 3 at a time. So you can just say, give me more, give me more. You can just keep saying that and it'll just keep doing it. But what you can do is say, listen, I'm in the retail industry. Give me some example problem statements in the retail industry. And it'll do it. And so what I found is it itself learns or had the ability, kind of emergent within it, to do this in specific areas to you. You can do it by job, you can do it by vertical, you can do it by industry, company type, whatever you want, and it'll actually do it. Identify the problem statements, work with you on them, and then develop the strategic briefs. So, I think that the way I think about this one, like I did with Jobs GPT and Campaigns GPT, is think of this as a consultant. Like,
Mm.
think of it like you're talking to a really talented consultant who can help you develop these problem statements and then can give you real time guidance for how to think about the strategic side. Now, the strategy output is not a final product. And you need to have expertise in your domain to know if the strategic output's even any good. But what I have found is it again gives you instant feedback to what it
Mm.
looks like. And these briefs, the way I trained it to do it is it restates the problem statement. It then goes through theoretical issues and drivers, like what's causing this problem. So it kind of teaches you a format that we teach in our framework, Mike. It then gives you strategic recommendations. It gives you a preliminary timeline for an implementation plan, expected outcomes, metrics for success, and then what resources are going to be needed. So every time you ask for a strategic brief, it actually follows that template. So I gave it an example in its knowledge base and kind of trained it on that model. So it's also helpful just to think about how a strategic brief should be structured, and
Mm.
this is what how it's trained. So yeah, I mean, like literally, we launched this thing. Mike helped me build the landing page over the weekend, in between being at a wedding. Thank you, Mike, for knocking that out. And then we launched it on Sunday afternoon. So I mean, this thing's been out in the wild for like less than 24 hours now. So it's a beta product. It's built on ChatGPT. It's not going to always get everything right. It may hallucinate some stuff, but I'll tell you, like Mike, we've sat in these workshops for like 3+ hours, and people get a ton of value out of them, but they leave with a list of problems, and now it's like, okay, now what do I do?
Mhm.
And I mean, my own experience with this thing is like within 3 minutes. you can have a bunch of problem statements identified, and you can start playing around with some ideas around strategic planning. And I don't know. I mean, it's still shocking to me that someone like me with no coding ability can just take a framework we've been teaching for like 6 years
Right.
and in a matter of like a couple weeks just build out this GPT that all of a sudden just has all these abilities. It's wild to me. Like we couldn't teach this to a strategic, like a senior strategist. Like this is the kind of thing back when we ran the agency that we would
Right.
be like trying to teach people the ability to do this. And here it just took a framework and some knowledge of how to prompt this thing, and all of a sudden it just does it. So yeah, smarterx.ai/problemsGPT, or you can just go to smarterx.ai and click on tools. They're all there. Give it a try. I don't know. I'd love to hear people's feedback. You've played around with it, Mike. Like, what did you think? You've been through it on both
Yep.
sides, like the manual side of trying to teach people this, and now having a tool that does it.
Well, that's what I love about it too. It's a great example of not only what's possible, but also what's possible when you give it your own original thinking. Like you had that framework, we've taught it, we know it works. Like when you combine that with the ability of these tools to extrapolate, reason, and strategize at scale, real magic happens. We're not just saying like, hey, AI, go think for me about a problem using generic data training sets, like very specific to what we have seen work and what we know works. And that's where this is really opening my eyes to, especially from a consulting perspective.
Yeah.
Anyone who has taught anything in any context, this is definitely something to be exploring, I would say.
Yeah, I think again, it just goes to this future of this like no code future where anyone can build anything they can imagine.
Mhm.
And this to me is just like a very early window into what that is going to look like. And I think that's a future that's coming very quickly through the
Yeah.
work of Replit and like Microsoft Copilots. I got to imagine. I mean, OpenAI hasn't made changes to custom GPTs since they announced them last year.
Yeah.
Like, there's got to be a version 2.0 coming, and maybe it's just a smarter model. I don't know, but I mean, yeah, as someone who ran a marketing agency for 16 years, um, I could sit here and probably list dozens of frameworks,
Mhm.
processes, things that we were doing manually that would take dozens or hundreds of hours sometimes that we could probably build custom GPTs for now that would like deliver immediate value to clients. And now what does that mean to your financial model as an agency? Like that's a whole
Yeah.
nother
Yeah.
ballgame. That's why we have our AI for agencies summit, is to try
We
and
have an
figure stuff
event
like
for
that
that.
out. But yeah, I mean, I would just encourage anyone that if you haven't built a custom GPT yet, or now you can do Google Gems with Gemini, and
Yeah.
Anthropic has projects, but like really take the one or two or three things you do over and over again, the frameworks you go through, the processes you have in place, and experiment with building one yourself. It is a very enlightening experience, and I mean, this is the third one I've built, and I texted Mike. I was like, "Dude, I'm just, like, shocked that this works." Like, I'm still having a hard time processing that we have this ability to now build these things, and they just work, like, on first trial. It's a wild future we're heading toward.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And yeah, you mentioned like Claude artifacts slash projects, like it's incredible. I've like built several apps already that like, I'm not like selling them to
Yeah,
anybody, but it's like, I don't know how to code and React. Like it's, and you can literally iterate right in a window on
with
software. It's
words. Like,
incredible.
it's
Yeah.
just like you just try
Yeah.
and figure out a way to say it to the AI so it
Yep.
understands what you're trying to say. And I think next week we might dive deep into this new prompting video we were
Yeah.
talking about, Mike, and it's just wild to me, like how human language is becoming the way you code. I don't know. It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
So something else that we actually did find pretty exciting this week as a main topic is we have a few more examples of real companies using generative AI to achieve real productivity gains. So a few things have come out where some people have collected a couple interesting examples I think are important to relate. So first, there was a weekly tech newsletter from Tane Jaipuria called Tane's Newsletter, which we'll link to in the show notes. And they list out a number of compelling recent AI case studies. So I'm just going to go through these really quick because I know that we have tracked a few of these individually, but I think hearing all these together is really compelling. So, first, Klarna. which is a payment company. They have an AI assistant that replaced 700 employees in terms of reducing the work of 700 employees, reducing resolution times on customer tickets from 11 minutes to 2 minutes while maintaining customer satisfaction. We'll talk about this one again in a second, but Salesforce's Agentforce platform is showing double-digit increases in customer satisfaction and case resolution rates. Microsoft expects to save hundreds of millions annually on call centers from adopting generative AI. Amazon's Q Assistant saved what they are terming 4,500 developer years worth of work. That is not a typo. And $260 million in costs for a recent code migration task. eBay has an AI-assisted selling flow that led to a 20-point increase in customer satisfaction. Rocket Mortgage has an AI assistant that transcribes calls and completes mortgage applications. It literally saves bankers from inputting millions of data fields weekly. And a final example they mentioned in the newsletter, Walmart used generative AI to improve over 850 million pieces of data in its product catalog. Now, on top of this, the consulting firm BCG also released some research around how GenAI can significantly expand worker capabilities. So they teamed up with Boston University and OpenAI's Economic Impacts Research team to see how GenAI is actually impacting work performance. So some of the notable things they found here is that AI leads to immediate, what they call aptitude expansion. So basically, in their tests, workers with no prior coding experience, to our previous point, achieved basically an 84% score on a benchmark that data scientists were using for a coding task. So they got like 84% of the way there with no experience by pair programming with GenAI. GenAI augmented participants in this work performed 49 percentage points better on those benchmarks than people without AI. They also found GenAI served as a valuable brainstorming tool for complex tasks. And they kind of summed this up really nicely with this quote. They said, quote, "A new type of knowledge worker is entering the global talent pool. This employee, augmented with generative AI, can write code faster, create personalized marketing content with a single prompt, and summarize hundreds of documents in seconds." So, Paul, I confess, like, this is like a near and dear topic to me because, like, I feel like I get heat online sometimes for people being like super skeptical that you can do anything to achieve real world results with generative AI, which I get. There's a lot of hype out there. I'm sure I contribute to it at times. It can't do everything and it has limitations, but like the benefits of this technology have been so immediately obvious in our own work that I'm just like I have a hard time understanding the skepticism. Like, are you seeing that too? Is that how you look at stuff like this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw Ethan Mollick tweeted this morning that,
Mm,
what he's seeing is um, the companies where the C-suite or the executives themselves are active participants in experimentation with
hmm.
LLMs are the ones that are racing ahead. The companies where the C-suite isn't using or has just tried it and didn't see what the value was,
Yeah.
are the ones that are lagging behind. And I think that's insanely true. Like I really don't understand how if you invest the time in experimenting with these models, you don't connect the dots of the value you could be creating. And these examples that Tanja gave, who by the way is a partner at Wing Ventures, a VC firm that invests in early stage AI companies, um, he's pulling excerpts from earnings calls.
Right.
So and it's interesting from an AI perspective. I wasn't following this guy. It surfaced in my For You feed on Twitter. Like that was how I came across it. And then you're like, like whatever, it's just another Twitter thread. Then I just did a little digging, and I was like, this guy's got some like really valuable stuff in his feed. Like he posts really good stuff and it's like research based. It's coming from good sources. So that was why I kind of flagged it for us to talk about. And then for you and I, Mike, like you remember this, like about 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was either Mike or Tracy on our team. I said, we need to build a database of brands actually using AI because at
Hmm.
that time it was really hard to find companies that were getting value from AI. And so we went out and searched and we created it was just a Google sheet where we were tracking stories of brands that had actually had success with AI. And so that was when I saw this tweet, I was like, man, times have changed. Like it
Right.
it's still challenging sometimes to find like great case studies because I think a lot of people who are having success just aren't talking about it intentionally, like
Yeah.
from a competitive standpoint. But I thought these are all really practical examples. And the thing I liked is in a lot of ways, it's innovation or expansion of capabilities over replacement of human tasks.
Right.
And so doing things like the 850 million, the product example one for Walmart, you just wouldn't do that. Like you wouldn't hire humans to do what they did. It just wouldn't happen otherwise. And so there's this balance between automating tasks that already exist, the 20 things I do for my job, the 50 things we do for these 5 campaigns, like the known things. And then there's looking at your work, your company and saying, what are all the things we're not doing that AI now enables? And that's
Right.
why I love this, these examples that he pulled out from these earnings reports. Is it's just really practical stuff that's showing the potential for this for AI to create value in all these new ways. And the other thing I'll say is I think a lot of times people get caught up in these like finding 10-20% productivity increases or efficiency gains.
Mm.
And then you look at examples like this and you realize when you pair AI, like the right AI tools with the right use cases, we are talking about like 50, 70,
Mm.
90% gains in some cases. And I think that's where some people get caught up and think it's hype. It's not. Like if you apply this to the right thing, like just think about our problems GPT model.
Right.
That is honest to God, a thing that would take dozens of hours that you can do in 3 minutes. Like get an initial run, initial draft in 3 minutes. We are talking about hundreds of percentage of increases in productivity gains. So it's yeah, I think people just they get overwhelmed by the hype if they're not experimenting themselves. When you're in this and you're finding that one use case you can get excited about, or you've seen it applied to something you were doing and you realize the potential of it,
Mm.
then it just becomes this game of looking at everything and matching AI with the things that are going to create the greatest value for you. And that's not hype. That's just a practical approach to applying AI to your business. And I think there's a massive opportunity still for professionals and business leaders and
Mm.
companies that do this in a strategic way, that take the use case model and the problem based model, that you're running these things simultaneously. You're looking at both ways to be more innovative and solve problems in a smarter way, and you're being more efficient and productive in your tasks. Like the companies that do both of those things and build a roadmap for how to do it well over the next 1 to 2 years, they're just going to leap ahead of their peer
Mm.
groups.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to kind of consider like, oh, okay, well, where do all these perspectives come from? And I also wonder too, we've talked about this a bit, how much of the skepticism is people approaching this like traditional software, where they try one prompt, it didn't work. They tried it a year ago on a much inferior model. It didn't do exactly what they wanted or what they said it could do. And that's kind of really where they stopped. Like, it's, well, okay, let's look at the prompt. Let's look at the model. Did you talk with it, coerce it into doing what
Right.
you wanted? Did you give it examples? I mean, I've literally had night and day different results with pretty basic tasks by changing up that approach. So just validates
And
everything you
I
just
think for a
said.
lot of companies, like a lot of business users, their only experience is Copilot. And the
Yeah.
reality is,
Yeah.
from everything we've seen, like Copilot within, Microsoft, it's just not at the level of using a Claude or a ChatGPT
Hmm.
outside of that environment.
Yeah.
And your common use cases there are like rewrite my email or write this draft or create this presentation. And I get how you could have an underwhelming experience if that's all you've ever done with a large language model is test Copilot or Gemini within Google Workspace. Like it could
Hmm.
be underwhelming, but get outside of those domains and really push ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini outside of the productivity platforms that you use at work every day, and I think you'll find a totally different experience.
All right. So our third big topic this week, Andrej Karpathy, who we have talked about many times, ex OpenAI, Tesla AI researcher, just gave an interview about the road to autonomous intelligence on the No Priors podcast. And in it, he covered a ton of ground in like 45 minutes. He's just brilliant and giving all these great takes on AI for self-driving cars, robotics, education, and much more. Interestingly, he also speculated we may see the development of kind of AI ecosystems in business where you essentially have like an AI organization that resembles a company where various models work together to achieve specialized roles that create business value. So definitely getting into like the future as now in this conversation. So Paul, you had flagged this and said you found it really notable and valuable. Like what jumped out at you here as particularly worth paying attention to?
This fits in that realm that Mike and I talk a lot about of, listen when the leading AI researchers and entrepreneurs talk, listen. Like there's always pieces of information within these interviews where you learn something new, it validates something you already believe to be true.
Mm,
But if nothing else, you get a window into where these leading minds are and what they think is going to happen next. So again, as I've always said, anytime it's Sutskever or Ilya or Dario Amade or Demis Hassabis or Sam, like I'll listen every time because there's always something in that interview. So a couple of things I found interesting. For me personally, Tesla versus Waymo. He spent a lot of time on this. So if you don't recall, he ran AI at Tesla for 5 years. He was in
mm,
charge of building full self driving at Tesla, so he knows ins and outs of that system probably better than anybody in the world. And if you've been in a Waymo or if you've been on the West Coast, you've maybe seen a Waymo driving around without a human driver. I was recently in Scottsdale, and that's like epicenter of Waymo right now. That and then out in Silicon Valley, San Francisco. These things are driving around everywhere. Well, the Waymos have these like huge contraptions, big piece of hardware on them that's enabling them to drive without a driver on these city roads. Tesla has gone the opposite direction. Tesla's computer vision only. It's got 8 cameras. Those cameras have the ability to see the roads, see objects, and that's how they learn and drive. Now, I have had a Tesla. I'm on my third one, so I've had it for 7 years, and I've been monitoring the full self-driving all the way along. If you've read our book, I actually have a whole
mm,
section of a chapter dedicated to how these models learn and why it matters. Um, but he said that he actually, while some people don't believe this to be true, he thinks Tesla is way ahead of Waymo, even though Waymo actually has cars driving people like taxi cabs, basically, or Ubers without drivers. Um, he feels Tesla is way ahead because he thinks Tesla only has to solve a software problem, and that is a very tractable thing to solve.
mm,
He feels that Waymo, which still has these really expensive devices, lidar and radar, and all these other cameras. Um, that they have a massive hardware problem to solve, and that's a much harder thing to get to. So I thought he had a really interesting perspective, and then he shared something I hadn't heard before, which is Tesla does use lidar and they use all these other things only in their training sets. So they have cars that have the lidar to go do all this mapping, but then the actual vehicle itself doesn't have those expensive systems. And so they're able to scale by focusing more on the training side and investing there, and then like diluting that or um, what's the term? Diluting, whatever. They take dilation, they call it,
mm.
taking it down to these like smaller models.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. The other thing I thought was fascinating is transformers. So we know transformers are the basis for ChatGPT and large language models. Transformer invented by the Google Brain team in 2017 with the attention is all you need paper. He is very bullish on the transformer. So he talked about these things as being largely underappreciated for how well they have scaled over these 7 years and with very little change. And so while there's some in the AI research community that think transformers are going to kind of like run up against these data walls and have other issues, he seems extremely bullish on transformers and the potential to continue building on top of them.
Mm,
He talked a lot about data, and the one thing I thought was really interesting is on episode 113 last week, we talked about this idea that the internet, which is where a lot of the training data comes for these models, is full of outputs. And what the internet lacks is the reasoning process that humans go through to get to those outputs, and that is fundamental to building like smarter AI models that can do this like system two thinking. And so he talked exactly about that, about how like this internet data is lacking, but all the research labs are like working on solving that. That also led into memorization. I think this is a really important thing for people with the future of education and work. The reality is, like right now, these models have limited memory. So, what 2 million context window, I think, is with Google Gemini is still the industry leading right now. Their research has shown they can get it to 10 million or more
Yeah.
tokens, which is roughly 9.5 million words. Like it would remember everything basically perfectly in that environment. So, I think most AI research labs assume that we are heading toward a day of infinite memory for these models. That they will just remember everything, and they will have instant recall on this. And so it's very important when we think about like what do we teach? How do we teach? How do we develop skills for professionals in our organizations? You do this under the assumption that we are all going to have infinite memory on call, that these models are going to remember everything. And so memorization of topics, being able to regurgitate things you've learned, isn't a human advantage. So
Mm.
when we think about how we train students, how we develop people, forcing them to just remember stuff isn't going to be uniquely human at all. And so he talks a lot about how these transformers actually have some advantages over the human brain, that there are these limitations, these inefficiencies in the human brain, and how these transformers won't and don't have those inefficiencies. And that can be kind of important moving forward. Talk a little bit about smaller models. We've touched on this quite a bit, how these bigger models are going to train and oversee the smaller models, which actually led to what you were mentioning, this idea of like AI models or LLMs making up companies that your CEO is maybe like GPT-6. It's the big, massive model that took 100 billion to train in a couple of years. That's your CEO. And then it manages a swarm of smaller models that are more cost efficient that do specific things. And that's something that I think is very abstract for people, but Andrej isn't alone in talking about this. I went back to for my opening keynote actually at MAICON this week. I went back and pulled the excerpt from July 2023 Atlantic article called "Does Sam Altman Know What He's Creating?" And in that article, Ilya Sutskever talked about this exact concept. He said, "The way I think about the AI of the future is not as someone as smart as you or as smart as me, but as an automated organization,
Mm.
constituent AIs working together at a high speed like bees in a hive. A single AI organization would be as powerful as 50 Apples or Googles." So this idea of like these big models and small models working together, I think that's something we're going to be hearing a lot more about and could start to play into like, I mean, Andres is building Eureka Labs.
Yeah.
My guess is he's building in this version. Like what's going to happen is these leading AI researchers are going to start building their own companies this way, and that'll set the groundworks for where we go. And then the final thing, which is the thing I'd shared on LinkedIn, is I have tremendous respect for Andres. Like I think he teaches with a humility that I find inspiring. His intro to LLMs YouTube video from earlier this year is like this amazing view into where everything is going. And so when he announced he had left OpenAI earlier this year, when he announced he was doing education, I was like, why? Like, what is
Mm.
he could raise billions. I mean, Ilya just raised 1 billion last week. Like, we're gonna talk about that in a minute. Like, Andres could raise billions to build an AI company, and yet he's seems to be focusing on education. And so they asked him point blank, like, why? And I loved his answer. He said, I would start with, I've always been an educator. I love learning. I love teaching. And so it's a space that I've been very passionate about for a long time. One macro picture that's kind of driving me is there's a lot of activity in AI to replace or displace people. It's the theme of sliding away the people, but I'm always more interested in anything that empowers people. And I feel like I'm team human, and I'm interested in things that AI can do to empower people. I don't want the future where people are on the side of automation. I want people to be very in an empowered state, and I want them to be amazing, even more amazing than they are today. And so I love that approach. And my basic belief is we just need more high profile AI researchers, investors, entrepreneurs on Team Human, as we
Mm.
would say. And we'll have to see how it plays out. But I think people like Karpathy taking this position opens the door for a lot of other AI researchers to take a similar position of innovation over replacement, basically that augmentation of people versus replacing the people. So yeah, it's a great interview. It's very technical. It's heavy on robotics for the first like 25 minutes. So if you're not that interested in that, you can kind of skip ahead to the other stuff. But always, like I said, there's insights when you hear these people give talks.
All right, so let's jump into some rapid fire topics this week. And like you mentioned, one of them concerns Ilya Sutskever, is that OpenAI's former chief scientist. He's making waves for his new venture called Safe Superintelligence, SSI for short. They have secured $1 billion in funding despite only being a few months old. And this investment values SSI at $5 billion. Now, their mission is to develop safe AI systems that far surpass human capabilities, i.e., safe superintelligence. Right now, they're splitting their operations between Palo Alto and Tel Aviv. And this investment round has, major people like Andreessen Horowitz involved, Sequoia Capital involved. And it really is, it's something Sutskever co-founded alongside two other AI experts, Daniel Gross and Daniel Levy, who is a former OpenAI researcher. And of course, this move comes after Sutskever was involved in the high-profile leadership drama of OpenAI last year, where he briefly supported ousting CEO Sam Altman before getting led out of the company. Now, Paul, this is, of course, really interesting given Ilya's background and pedigree, but I do want to ask the obvious question. How is this company valued at $5 billion already?
Because it's Ilya. As I said, like Andres could raise whatever he wanted. I mean, Elon's got a company valued at 24 billion that had done nothing. It's just right now there's only, so many top AI researchers that can attract talent. That's a real key, that they have the name and the history that they're able to go get other top researchers to come with them. And that's where a lot of the value is being accrued, is in the talent within the teams and what they're capable of building. The interesting thing with Safe Superintelligence is he has very specifically said they have zero product plans.
Mm.
They are going on a straight line to superintelligence. They are not going to do a ChatGPT like bot. They're not going to do all these other things. They're going to pursue this superintelligence, and they'll let us know when they get there, basically. um, if you want to like a little bit more about this, so last week's episode 13, we talked about Ilya related to that Project Strawberry. And I think you could go back to his work from spring of 23, the Let's Verify Step by Step paper, as maybe a preview of what they're working on, how they're approaching this differently.
Hmm.
This was only Ilya's third tweet of the year. I mean, after the OpenAI drama last fall, he kind of went MIA for a long time. His tweet was "Mountain identified, time to climb." That was the whole tweet, and it linked to the Reuters article about the $1 billion. In the article, he actually gave an interview, which he hasn't done all year that I'm aware of. And he said they're going to take a different approach than he previously took at OpenAI, building on maybe some of the things he had learned there. But he said everyone just says scaling hypothesis, meaning the scaling laws, that they're going to keep throwing more data, more compute, and it'll keep improving. Everyone neglects to ask, what are we scaling? So
Mm.
he's kind of being mysterious here, but some people, this is a quote, some people can work really long hours and will just go down the same path faster. It's not so much our style. But if you do something different, then it becomes possible for you to do something special. So, there is a lot of belief, like again, like a Jan LeCun is one of the people in this camp at Meta, that we need other breakthroughs, that super intelligence. Now, again, you could argue, should we even be pursuing super intelligence? Do we really want AI that is smarter than humans at all cognitive tasks, like
Mm.
smarter than expert humans at all cognitive tasks? Um, we don't get a say in it. They're going to pursue it whether we agree that it should exist or not. So this pursuit, though, is believed that we're going to need something more than the transformer. That the transformer, that's the basis for today's large language models, will get us so far, but it won't get us to maybe AGI or beyond AGI. And so Ilya here is kind of alluding to the fact that maybe they have a different way, that there's another process to go through, other scientific breakthroughs that they maybe envision that'll get us there. So certainly worth following. They're obviously being very secretive about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I don't expect that to change. Although his history is releasing research papers. Like,
Mm.
he's kind of a research AI researcher through and through. So maybe they'll publish some papers along the way, but I think they're only going to release what they believe can be safely understood by society. If they think they're onto something that they need to solve the safety side for first, they're not going to tell us about it. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear anything from Ilya for another 6 months.
So, in other news, OpenAI is exploring some new pricing that could have a big impact on anyone who uses their technology. This comes from The Information, and they say that internal discussions have reportedly touched on subscription prices as high as $2,000 per month for upcoming large language models from OpenAI. Though The Information says it's unlikely the final price tag will get that high. Now, comes as we've talked about two highly anticipated releases from OpenAI: Strawberry, which is some type of potentially advanced reasoning capability, and Orion, the code name for their new flagship model. Now, ChatGPT's current $20 a month subscription has already generated an estimated $2 billion in annual revenue, but it sounds like that might not be enough to cover all the costs that OpenAI also incurs. Now, of course, OpenAI, we also talked about, is in the midst of talks to do a massive fundraise as well and secure billions in new capital as well from people like Microsoft, Apple, and potentially NVIDIA. Now, Paul, like The Information readily says, don't expect OpenAI to include a $2,000 subscription tier for their most advanced stuff. But like the fact that they're even considering this seems to indicate they think people would pay that much for access to their most advanced models. Like, how are you thinking about that? Is that true?
Yeah, so I think the market is set for what the current models are capable of. I mean, everybody's in the $20 to $30 per month realm, and anything beyond that is probably not going to fly.
Mm,
I think you already have enterprises like a few episodes ago, like 105, 106, we talked about, was it Chevron and their 20,000 Microsoft Copilot licenses and question the value of it. Um, I think for enterprise adoption, you're looking at that. Now, if they unlock advanced reasoning capability where these things are much more advanced in problem solving, assisting in decisioning, driving innovation,
mm,
and you can productize that in a very understandable way, then certainly. If we zoom out, 2000 a month is 24,000 a year. Like that's nothing if it's applied correctly. Like
right.
if you can handhold to use cases where you're showing them the value, and now you unfortunately you have to equate it to FTEs. Like you're basically saying like, hey, instead of hiring this role or adding more headcount, this will do the job of three programmers that you're paying 175,000 a year each. And so
Mhm.
now 2,000 a month doesn't seem like that much, which up until honestly, you were giving kind of the intro here. I didn't think about this, but if we connect this back to the automated organization that
Yep.
Ilya and Andres talked about, I could 100% see. I don't think OpenAI is going to do this, but somebody's going to do this with open source tech. They're going to sell autonomous organizations. So if you think about what we sold as an agency for 16 years, we were
Mhm.
an outsourced marketing team, basically. Like we would bring in SEO capabilities, content creation capabilities, brand capabilities, research capabilities. Like you were plugging and playing, but as the CEO of that agency, I was building a team of people capable of doing these things that I would then provide to clients as a service. I can completely see that idea of we're going to have a CEO level LLM, like a really, really advanced reasoning capable engine that I'm going to pay 2,000 bucks a month for. And I'm going to have this like really powerful model. And then I'm going to have a swarm of like an SEO GPT and a copywriter GPT and all these. I am not saying it should happen. I'm telling you it's going to happen, that someone is going to build this as a service, autonomous organizations as a service,
Mm.
where you might then be paying 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 a month because you're paying for the capabilities that otherwise you would have had to have go get an agency or consulting for. I don't I'm not as I'm thinking this as I'm saying this. So like, this is this is like real
The
time stuff.
first draft,
Uh
yeah.
yeah, this isn't next year. I'm not saying that next year we're going to not need agencies or anything like that. I'm saying these researchers think this is possible and that this is a likely future where we
Mm.
have 1 to 10 person billion-dollar companies being built. And so someone is going to look at that and start building solutions around. I mean, this is what Salesforce Agentforce that we're going to talk about next is basically doing.
Doing, right.
It's what Google's basically doing with building AI coworkers. Like, no one's calling it this yet, but in essence, that's what they're all doing, is building up agents that are able to do these things, that when you connect them together and they function like a swarm or like bees in a hive, they're able to go do all these pieces. And if they report up to the really powerful LLM that you're paying 2,000 or 5,000 a month for, and that LLM is able to manage the work of the worker bees,
That
man, like,
becomes,
the
yeah.
and this is, like, honestly, like, this isn't even timed this way, but, like, my opening keynote gets into this. Like, I kind
Mm,
of go into the idea of the Ilya quote and the future, and this is the stuff I just don't think people are ready to talk about yet. Like, years ago, I remember I wouldn't talk about AGI on LinkedIn because I didn't think, like, we were ready, that
right,
people were ready to hear it yet,
right.
and I would put this autonomous organization idea in that realm from 3 years ago where AGI was, where no one was, like, wanted to hear it. My guess is no one wants to hear this conversation right now, but this is absolutely where it's going. And I think it, again, it requires agents to become reliable and accurate. We may be a
Mhm.
year or two away from that, but this is reality. Like, people are going to build these things and people are going to do these things, and I think you're going to start hearing about early forms of it in 2025, probably.
Well, let's carry this thread through to the next
That just
topic
became
because
like a
I'm
main
no, I'm
topic.
saying, yeah,
Like,
I'm serious. I think this it gels really well, and I have some follow-ups here because, like,
yeah,
the next topic that you mentioned is Salesforce is creating a new platform called Agentforce that's set to debut at their annual Dreamforce conference, which takes place next week. CEO Mark Benioff is calling this a quote hard pivot for the company. They're basically reimagining Salesforce as all in on AI agents. So Agentforce goes beyond just a typical AI chatbot. It allows users to build and deploy autonomous AI agents that can make decisions and complete complex multi step tasks. So this operates on top of Salesforce's existing business apps with a focus on automating customer service tasks. So it sounds like, at least on paper, the entire company is kind of starting to reorient around this idea of AI agents. And they are making, it seems, at least a big public bet that this is going to be the future. So, Paul, like maybe carrying through this point, like not only people inventing autonomous organizations, as startups that compete with agencies and service providers, but what happens when this stuff gets baked into, anytime you mention Salesforce, I immediately think of HubSpot
yep.
too, right? Like there's an entire agency ecosystem in HubSpot,
Which is
like
how we started. If people don't know, like,
100%. Yeah.
PR 2020, my agency was HubSpot's first partner in '07. So yeah, I agree. I
So
see
is
that a
that
lot.
where this is going?
Yeah.
Do you think? Okay.
Yeah, so, like, Dharmesh Shah, the co-founder of HubSpot, owns Agent.ai, and they're building a professional network of AI agents. Now that's outside of HubSpot at the moment, to my understanding,
Mhm.
but they just rolled ChatSpot, was the chatbot
Jet,
that
yeah.
that's now part of HubSpot, and this is kinda how Dharmesh rolls. Like, he'll build these kind of, projects on the side, and then they eventually get kinda rolled into HubSpot. So I could see Agent.ai being a similar path. So yeah, and I think agent is just this confusing term right now,
Yeah.
because so often when it's talked about, or it has been talked about, an AI agent meant like level, was it 3 on OpenAI's intelligence rev? So once we get past reasoners, then we get to agents. So the
Right.
ability for these things to take actions on our behalf. Right now, what I think we're getting is a bunch of rules based agents that have some LLMs built into them. So it's like, it's kind of blending the lines between just traditional automation, where someone writes some rules that connect some Zapier zaps to do some
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and I think people are kind of calling those agents right now. Like, in some ways you could say, like, well, Problems GPT is an agent. It's like, it's not, like, not
Right.
the way I would think about what an agent is going to be, that can go do things for me, take actions on my behalf, that I don't have to program. It just learns it. Like what Replic's doing right now with their agents
Mhm.
is like an early preview of that. So I think we're in this kind of weird stage where we're calling agents the same thing, but they're really not. But I do think that as these things get more intelligent, it's gonna be like just giving a prompt. You're gonna be able to do prompt to agent, and
Right.
I'm not gonna need to build 7 Zaps and Zapier and do all these other things. I'm just gonna say, I want an app that, runs custom dashboards for me whenever I ask for data, and it just goes and it learns how to do it, and it comes back and says, "Okay, I'm able to do this now. What do you wanna visualize?" And the agent just does it. Or, "I want you to send an email in HubSpot, and here's what I want it to do. And it just goes and it picks the list and it does the things. And like, that's what I think of agents as. Like, I think of
Because
this agentic future.
it sounds wild to say, but what you're describing, like, again, when or if it ends up working as envisioned, is literally like, we have text to video, text to image, text to speech. This is text to employee. It's
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
you
It's beyond
literally
text to
spin
app.
up
You're
an
right. It's
employee, you know?
yes.
It's
And if you can spin
crazy.
up an employee that does things, like
Right.
what
Yeah.
was the example I just saw? Oh, Google has like a new thing. I forget the name. I'll see if I can look it up in a minute. But um, it'll just like turn a podcast into short, like or
Mm.
turn a research paper into a podcast, and like that's
Yeah.
like maybe you have an employee that does that, and
Yep.
so
Yep.
yes, it's like how big is the scope of the task that we can build these things to do, and in some ways it may just become an employee, and again, like the labs can't talk about it. Like you have to understand that they know that AI is going to replace people.
Yep.
Like, I'm not saying all jobs are going away or anything like that, but they know what they're building will replace people.
Mhm.
They can't say that. They cannot tell you that an AI coworker is a replacement to your coworker. They can't position it that way. So we're going to keep talking about it as agents and coworkers and co-pilots because that's what the marketing messages have to say. But they understand, trust me, they all do, that what they're building is going to disrupt the workforce.
Yep.
um, they also believe that there is a possibility it does grow the workforce by growing productivity. Like, and so they're trying to race to find the ways that it benefits the workforce before it disrupts it so much that the negative becomes obvious.
Mm.
That's what's happening. Like, it's trust me, I've talked to them, like, this is how it's working. They know it's coming. They're just trying to find the ways for a soft landing where we create a abundant, beautiful future, but it's not promised. Like we're gonna be in this realm where we're just not sure, which is why we do what we do. It's like we gotta talk about this because it can be good, but we gotta like make an effort to get it there first.
That ties nicely back to what you admired about Andrej Karpathy's
Yeah.
approach and
100%.
motivation. Yeah.
Yep. And that's we need more people like him saying it out loud because he knows better than anybody what these things are capable of doing
Yeah.
and that we're not that far from it. And we got to be intentional about creating a better future with these things.
All right. Now that we've written your MAICON
Yeah,
2026,
really, I gotta go
we're
rewrite my,
gonna, yeah. All right. Just a couple more topics on the docket this week. But next up is Anthropic has announced the launch of Claude Enterprise, which is basically an enterprise tier for Claude that helps organizations securely collaborate with Claude using their internal knowledge. So, some interesting features that come with the enterprise plan. There's a 500,000 token context window, so much, much larger than I believe the previous one is about 200,000 on the commercial facing version of Claude. That's equivalent to tons of transcripts, literally dozens of 100+ page documents if you want. There's a GitHub integration. A native GitHub integration is being introduced in beta, allowing engineering teams to sync entire code bases with Claude. There are enhanced security features like single sign-on, role-based access. Some features coming soon include audit logs and a system for automated user provisioning. And they emphasize that Claude does not train on customer conversations and content at this tier. So it ensures the privacy of your organization
but does
using
it other
this.
tiers?
I'm not sure. They say Anthropic emphasizes that Claude does not train on customer conversations and content. I am not a lawyer. Go read the terms and
Yeah,
conditions
read the
of the
terms,
free
basically.
plans that you're using, I would say. Don't quote me on any of
Yeah.
that. So Paul, like, we love Claude. Others consistently tell me that they love it. Like, I'm kind of actually surprised we're only now getting an enterprise offering. Like, is this kind of where all these companies are moving to, like, go up market?
Well, I mean, look how much money OpenAI is making on it.
Yeah.
It's the obvious play. It just takes time to build an enterprise movement. Like Anthropic is a research firm. They're trying to figure out how to be a product company. Like it just takes time, and it's not going to work great to start. I mean, they'll probably make a bunch of money, but it building an enterprise platform is no joke. Anybody who's worked in enterprise software knows
Mm.
this doesn't just happen. The one thing I find fascinating is how far ahead is Google that they have a 2 million context window already that
No kidding.
5 months ago they said showed it worked at 10 million. And yet the enterprise play from Anthropic is still only 500,000, which is a lot. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, think ChatGPT is 128,000.
Right.
Like, it's a lot, but it like Google's huge. Like, what did
It's
Google unlock that like I don't know. That's
what they
interesting.
unlocked and also probably what they can afford to
Yeah,
to
that's maybe the
support
play, honestly.
those. They got a
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
true.
ad dollars to
Got those
throw at
data
that.
centers and their own chips, and yeah,
But
that's what
it
we've always
does
said. Google's got an advantage. Like, people underestimate it, but
for sure, and but to your point too, it's not I'm be pretty confident saying it's not just their budget. Like they have done some fundamental research breakthroughs. Like there are
most of the
incredible
fundamental
most
research
fundamental,
breakthroughs came
yeah,
from Google.
right. So
Yeah,
definitely don't sleep on that.
yeah.
All right. So next up, we got introduced to a new AI term this week that we think is important to understand moving forward. The term is, quote, copyright laundering. And it comes from a post from Ed Newton Rex, who posted on X. He's an ex Stability AI leader who actually left that company over copyright concerns. In his post, he wrote, quote, models will be retrained on synthetic data alone, attempting to limit copyright risks and the need to license data. Of course, that synthetic data will be created using models trained on copyrighted work without permission. The copyright laundering cycle will be complete. Paul, you raised attention to this term in a follow on post. Can you kind of unpack for us what was compelling about this from you? Basically, if we're using synthetic data, that was trained on something copyrighted, but you can maybe get away with then using that data to train a new model.
Yeah, I just thought so. Ironically, Ed, we talked about last week. I was saying
Yes.
like he's out there fighting the good fight on this stuff. So
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
funny timing. I saw this, but no, I just thought it was such a great term. I think he kind of coined the phrase, but it's this whole idea of like money laundering. It's like you take the illegal money, you funnel it through some real estate, and comes out the other side, clean. And that's exactly what's happening. They're training these models on copyrighted material. You use the model, the bigger model, like Orion or whatever it is, to produce synthetic data that doesn't have a copyright. And then that synthetic data trains the next model or the smaller models. And that model all of a sudden comes out clean with no copyrighted material in it. Um, it's just fun. Like it's a very visual, easy thing to visualize. And so I thought it was a clever term, and
Yeah.
it seemed extremely accurate to what's going on and probably how this is going to be done moving forward.
All right. So Time Magazine has unveiled its second annual Time 100 AI list. This showcases the most influential figures in AI. And they come from a diverse range of backgrounds, some tech giants, startups, policymakers, privacy advocates. The list, as you would expect, has a bunch of notable people we always talk about: Google CEO Sundar Pichai, Sam Altman, NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, Mark Zuckerberg, Google DeepMind leader Demis Hassabis. There's also a bunch of other interesting people that might be flying a little more below the radar that are well worth checking out on the list. But there's one high profile AI figure missing who has a little bit of a habit of attracting controversy and commentary. So a bunch of stories have already come out about the fact that Time snubbed him, and this is Elon Musk. So he is not on the list, and people supposedly are up in arms about it. So
AKA the bots on Twitter.
yeah, the autonomous organizations on Twitter put out
Yeah.
information. So did you, when you looked at this list, like did any inclusions or omissions like surprise you or kind of make you sit up and take notice?
Uh, well, I mean, the no Elon Musk thing is ridiculous. Like, he
Yeah,
should be there. It's
he
kind of
has
like
to be
when
on
the
that
White
list.
House had electric car
Yeah,
day and didn't invite
yeah,
Elon Musk.
right,
Like,
right.
sometimes it's just obvious he's being snubbed
He's
intentionally. Now,
for
keep in
sure.
mind, Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, owns Time Magazine. So I, I'm not saying Mark made the decision to not have Elon on there, but if Mark Benioff thought Elon should be on there, my guess is Elon would have been on there, or if there
Hmm.
wasn't something else going on. So that was one. The senator who's pushing the SB 1047 bill, he was on there. And the funny thing is, he tweeted about it, and it's like, I don't think he realizes he's probably on there for the wrong reasons. And he's like, kind of
Yeah,
like humble bragging about being on this.
yeah.
Like, dude, like, take the temperature of the room for a minute before you go, talking about that. But anyway, no, I mean, like any list, it's going to be controversial, and there's going to be people on there who probably shouldn't be, and a bunch of people who probably should be. But it's good. Like, I mean, people are always trying to figure out who to follow in this space. So go check
Yeah.
it out, read it, see if there's some people on that list that maybe you weren't aware of, or you've heard us mention a few times but weren't following them yet, that are worth following along.
All right, our final topic today is more of a preview of next week because today is Monday, September 9th, and this afternoon, Apple is going to have its scheduled Apple event. It is called, I believe it's Glow Time, and it is going to be revealing things about the new iPhone. Some Apple Intelligence, their AI features, are going to be talked about, but Apple has been postponing more and more of those features and the announcements around them. So we're going to do a deep dive into all that because by the time you listen to this, the event will have happened. So next week, we're going to go deep on what they do announce. But Paul, any kind of final thoughts there of what to expect? Or it seems like some of the AI stuff is getting being pushed back a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Like they're going to probably announce it all. Like they announced it all already a couple months ago. We covered when they
Yeah.
introduced Apple Intelligence and
Yeah.
said it was coming this fall. So I think everything they introduced is still probably coming, but I don't think that like 2 weeks from now you're going to get your iPhone 16 and it's going to have every AI capability baked into it. It
Mhm.
sounds like they're going to probably slow roll it for whatever reason, additional testing. It's just not ready for prime time yet. But I would expect the next version of Surrey will be in there, which is where the glow time comes from. Because if you've seen the previews, when you talk to the new Surrey, the beveled edges actually glow. So
Mm.
it's actually like a much more prominent activity. And I think there's like a wave function that happens across the screen, like things like roll. So that's where the glow time is coming from. So I'm anxious to do it. I will, I'll, as I do with every Apple product, I will go buy it, and hopefully it's not the Apple Vision Pro that I just realized yesterday I hadn't put on my head in like 8 weeks. I actually use it. I do expect it to be cool. I'm not so sure it's going to be like the world changing infusion of AI that maybe, we thought it could be earlier this year, but we'll see what happens.
All right, Paul, that's all we got this week outside of, MAICON. So
Just that small little 1,000+ person conference we got to go run
yeah.
for the next few days.
But as some final quick housekeeping notes, go check out the Marketing AI Institute newsletter, which wraps up all the news we talked about and all the stuff that doesn't fit in this episode. marketingaiinstitute.com/newsletter. And if you don't mind and have not done so, and can do so on your podcast platform of choice, we'd love to have a review from you. Just let us know how we're doing, how we can improve. Every single bit of feedback helps. So,
Or if
Paul.
you're watching those YouTube videos, like my kids always like watching, like, hit that subscribe button
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. Right. Paul, all right. Thanks so much for going through everything for us. Really appreciate it.
All right, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. We'll see you on the other side of MAICON. Thanks for listening to the AI Show. Visit marketingaiinstitute.com to continue your AI learning journey and join more than 60,000 professionals and business leaders who have subscribed to the weekly newsletter, downloaded the AI blueprints, attended virtual and in-person events, taken our online AI courses, and engaged in the Slack community. Until next time, stay curious and explore AI.